Hello, everybody. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And of course, we have our beautiful Jessie back with us.
Hello,
Jessie,
hello.
you have been so impressed, I'm telling you that much. Welcome back, and really, really, really good to have you back. How are you, beautiful lady?
Yeah, hanging in there. Haven't been getting into too many shenanigans, but just a few.
I don't believe you, sugar. I don't believe you at all.
Stirring up the pot everywhere I go.
Well, as long as we're not meeting each other in the astral plane again with wearing red dresses, right?
Right? I mean, I've never done that, but hey, there's always a first time, right?
Well, we get accused of all sorts of things, but anyway, so we're having fun with that at least.
I know we still got to do a show
Jess,
on that. Wow. All the nefarious things we get accused of doing that we don't even know about.
Exactly. Anyway, got to have fun with it, right? Because you don't laugh, you might cry about it. So prefer to have good few laughs about these things. Anyway, as you guys say, laughs. I mean, do you know how aware I am of my accent speaking to all you Americans? I feel like I've got like this flat accent. And I feel like I've got to start rounding my A's as well, like you do.
Rounding your A's. Oh, you just got to work on the O part, Shanti. You know, the Scandinavians, they drop their O's, and, you know, you go and you buy oatmeal and you take care of your goats and you wear your winter coat and you float down the moat, you know, like it's got to be like oats.
Something like that, exactly. Wow. Well, we're somewhere in between. Anyway. Well, before we get cracking, I want to just know, what have you got going on right now? I know you've got a whole lot of courses and things. You want to tell us what you're up to with that?
Yeah, I want to encourage people to check those out. You know, this is a great time of year as everything is slowing down for people to kind of just really press into the Lord and work on different, you know, spiritual formation things. And I guess that's what I would classify a lot of the videos or the courses that I do. They're focused on, you know, developing your relationship with the Lord and, you know, kind of that spiritual formation outlook on things. So a lot of it focuses on authority. And, you know, I've been seeing a lot of stuff. It's interesting that, you know, as I've visited a few churches and talked to a few people really struggle in that area of authority. You know, they see the enemy working, they see all this wickedness in their area, you know, and they want to do something about it, but they don't know what they can do. And many of them are bound by fear. You know, one of the things I get a lot is people say, well, you know, I talk about going in and, you know, going after the principalities in areas, and then, you know, as you're praying and taking back the authority of that land in that area, you know, what does scripture say that we can do? It says that we can break those chains of wickedness and that yoke of oppression asunder. And people get scared. You know, they think, well, I don't have enough spiritual warfare experience. I don't, you know really much about deliverance or, you know, taking on strong men. But scripture says that we can do that. You know, it says that the fullness of the authority of the Lord is ours, and that, you know, in his name, we can do these things. So I do a lot of teaching on that. And those courses are Foundations of Kingdom Living, The Rise of the Righteous, which is really good, and then Beautifully Adorned, where we begin to look at, as you begin to walk in your authority, how, you know, how has your health been affected by not walking in that authority? And as you begin to walk in that authority, how can your health be restored? So it's interesting that our health connects to how we walk spiritually.
Absolutely. It really is, you know. I mean, I mean, healthy mind, healthy emotions, healthy spirit, healthy body, right? And it doesn't mean that, of course, if someone is ill or sick or something, that they've got an unhealthy spirit. I'm not trying to suggest that. But I think it's so amazing when we start realizing that God really does want us to be healthy, right? And when we accept that grace, that's when we are healthy in every way. I mean, I see that in my own life time and time again, and as a healer, for sure, that for me is something that's become very obvious.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And I think the difference in that is that, you know, when you're not walking in that authority, you know, a lot of people are in that place where they're begging, they're beseeching, you know, there's kind of a disconnect in that relationship with God where, you know, God is seen more as kind of this, you know, kind of being that's higher up or farther away, and you're begging, you're pleading, versus when you are walking in the authority, you know that you can walk straight into his, you know, presence. You can
right.
bow down before him, and all you do is ask. You know, you can ask face to face like you're speaking to somebody else. So, you know, it's a matter of positioning and that relationship.
Absolutely. It's so true. Wow. Well, we've got a couple of things on the cards today, so let's just see how far we get. But tell us about what's happening with Casper. All eyes on Casper. Can you shed
Yeah,
some light on?
there is so much, and I did a great live stream on infiltrated truth on Telegram. You can see that connection in my Twitter for the exact site, but we had a big conversation about everything that's been going on with Casper since I turned in my affidavits about that, which include
Right.
affidavits on Yellowstone National Park. And one of the discussions we got into last night, Shanti and Morné, was that there it looks like somebody now is trying to sell off pieces of this national property after the affidavits have gone out. And they're saying that the funds are going to go towards the schools, but like they're trying to sell one of the areas for like 80, I think it was like $80 million. And so it's
Wow.
like, how can they sell national land? So we were really looking into that. You know, we were looking at who, you know, who owns the land, who may be purchasing. There were some things that look like you have companies like ExxonMobil who have been highly involved in that situation. It looks like they've had some pipelines in that area, that some of those pipelines they sold off. Um, but, you know, it kind of goes back to the fact that, you know, you've got main Nazi facilities in that area underground. And what we're seeing is just the above ground activity. Do they have kids there? You know, is that why they're saying that they're going to bring in FEMA camps for the immigrant children in that area all of a sudden? And, you know, my theory is that they've already had kids there, and, you know, that FEMA camp is just going to be a cover for the movement of children from one location to another. But, you know, we've talked about how that area too also has human hunts in the mountains there. You have the sovereign military that, you know, will pull people out in that area and hunt them. So there's a high concern if all of a sudden they're bringing immigrant children who are undocumented. There's no way, you know, of knowing where those kids are coming from or where they're going. Nobody's keeping track of numbers. Um, you know, so what is happening to those precious little kids that they're bringing into that area?
I would like to, you know, on that topic of human hunts, can we just expand on that, please? Because are we just talking kids here? Because we hear a lot about kids, you know, obviously these depraved ones that are hunting kids. But when you're talking human hunts, are we talking just kids, or are we talking adults now as well?
No, it includes adults. I've witnessed things where they had defectors or um, sovereign military people who made mistakes that, they weren't things that could just be swept under the rug, where then they would pull them out into those mountain areas, release them, and then, hunt them.
Who hunts them?
My experience, it was people in the sovereign military. So that could be people dressed up as, not just dressed up. You've got local governments, within those areas, you have, park and rec, you have fish and game, you have law enforcement, you have security. So people who are working in the park as well as those outside of the park, um, some of the elite pay big money to come in for those hunts. You get,
I'm actually,
like, the lodges out there, I've talked about how, like, a lot of times they'll bring the elderly or the retired elite, will come in for those big, mountain lodges, and they'll bring kids into them. Usually I didn't see, like, in those, they wouldn't necessarily, um, murder or kill the children, but they would hunt them with the smaller kids within the lodge, um, is who they would subdue, and then they would engage in different forms of sex magic with them.
I mean,
Is
this is absolutely insane to actually hear about, because I remember as well, we were, Ash, who was an Australian survivor, was on our show maybe a year ago, speaking about these hunts that they were doing in Australia as well. And then they would, certain kids, there would be those that had various numbers or whatever, and certain kids were marked for certain death. However that happened, I can't imagine that they would just do a clean shot, right? They probably would do a lot of depraved things before they actually took the life of the person, right, or the child. But then what they would do afterwards is, the kids that survived, right, and they would be very grateful and very happy that they actually survived this hunt. But the next thing, they would then have these high-level weapons, these new military weapons, and then they would blow the kids away, the ones that survived, with these weapons. I mean, do you know anything about that? Is that sort of a similar type thing as well?
Yeah, that's similar to my experiences where, it doesn't matter, what you've gone through. Both, I think both the hierarchy and the expendable children experience that. And, those things are similar to what they refer to as the games. They look at these hunts really as games. At the heart of it, you have, um, at some parties where you've got elite members who are sponsoring, buying, selling, trading these kids, and they're, using these kids in competition. And the competitions are very real, you know. So, some of our groups I've talked about, like with the schools, where they would select, different areas, training center areas. They would, it seems like every 10, 20 years, they would pick 8 children in that area who would kind of be the ones that they're raising up to be commanders in that area with the sovereign military. And as they're training those kids, you're going to both the military bases, you're going to different areas, which would include, national parks, different reserves, and you're going to go through things that they call obstacle courses. And we talked about this in some of the military base shows that we did about the 2 military bases, where with those obstacle courses, there's different things you're going to encounter, like, there's going to be a bridge, and you've got to cross that bridge. Underneath it, there could be lava, there could be water with sharks. As you go across that bridge the first time, it's going to be that it collapses, and what do you have to do to get yourself out of that situation? What they want you to do is use your magic and your magical powers and abilities. And really, there's no limit to what you can do or can't do. But at the end of the day, they keep adding things. So, the next day you think that, okay, like, you've gone over and over the situation in your head, and you're like, okay, next I'm gonna hang on to the rope because the rope didn't fall, just some of the boards collapsed and stuff. But then they're going to, electrify that rope, so when you grab it, you're gonna get electrocuted. Um, so they always add things like that. And do they create weapons, um, just to torture? Absolutely. Some of the scarier things are, we know that the US military has uh, been claiming that they have diamond technology. When we think about that, where did they get those diamonds from? Especially those that they claim are lab grown. Those are children, that they've murdered and they've incinerated and turned into diamonds so they can still profit off of them in their death. And
What
then
is diamond
now,
technology? Sorry, I want to just ask you there. What exactly, when you talk about diamond technology and how they use it, can you expand on that?
well, I think they use it in technical things to heighten, speed. They use it in, um, some of their military machinery, whether that's vehicles, helicopters. Um, they create weapons that, can make use of those diamonds. Which,
Would
what
that,
does the diamond allow? It allows dimensional access. So,
right,
light and energy moving through that, um,
right.
at light speed through different dimensions.
And would that be part of what we've heard? I know Caleb Jade has been talking about the soul gems. So would that also be part of how they've captured souls within these types of things and then using that as to propel that as well,
That
if you will?
that is what they claim about it. In my experience, I would say that, my belief is not that you actually have a soul there, because I don't think that they can actually capture the soul. That is God's possession and God's property. And scripture says that,
Yeah,
it's appointed unto man once to die, and then the afterlife, that we return to God. So I think that they want us to believe that, but if, let's just, play with theories here, if they could capture souls, you know, what are they still then doing with that soul afterwards? That's a whole new level of wickedness. Um, if they continue to access somebody's soul, and, whether that's through sexual encounters or making that person do stuff in the spirit realm that they want done. Um, but
right,
yeah, there you get into a whole new level of soul torture.
right. Wow. So what
Oh, did Shanti freeze?
Okay, it's not me. I thought it was me.
I thought it was me too.
Oh
I wasn't
goodness.
sure where she was going next, but um, yeah, and in that, I think that, going a little deeper into that, in the system, we are taught that, that they can capture the soul. And some of the things, back in the 1980s, where the system would cause fear with that, one of the ways they did that was through movies like The Dark Crystal, which was done by Disney and
Oh
Henson.
yes.
And if you go back into that, what do they show? They show, the little creature being strapped to a chair. They show them, stealing the soul essence out of their body, and then,
Yeah,
focusing
yeah.
that into a stone or something that they have that they control. Um, you know, you do hear stories about end of life where the witches will breathe the last breath of somebody, and in that they believe they've captured their soul. You get things like that that are teachings in the system for that soul capture. So that is stuff that is witnessed by kids in the system. But how much of that is really truth versus deception. And we have an enemy that's very deceptive. He wants us to believe that he forever holds us captive, and that we're forever separated from God. And that I think that that's not always the case. I think that some of that has been deception, that the enemy has created to cause more of that feeling of hopelessness and despair in people, where they kind of give up, try to come to God because they feel like, they never can.
Yeah, because if you believe in something, that you will experience it. It's like, if you believe it, you will experience it. But there's still something, like there must be something. It couldn't be all deception. There must be some form of truth. Maybe it's not the soul that's being captured. Maybe it's an essence, or maybe it's a, I don't know.
What's interesting about that is
maybe it's like the smell of a rose, but it's not the rose that's being captured, but maybe the smell of the rose that's being captured. It's
possible, the essence, some of the light energy. We know that different forms of rock, are almost like recorders, where, they can record an imprint in time. So, is that some way maybe with those diamonds, where literally it's like, almost like it's taking a picture of the print of that soul in time, or is it demonic, where, the demons are pretending to be that individual, that you have some unclean spirit that comes in there in that deception, and draws that person further into forms of necromancy or communicating with the dead.
Wow, okay. Interesting.
Well, apparently somebody didn't want me asking certain questions.
What was your question, Shanti?
What I was saying, sorry, I actually missed the last 5 minutes or so, so I don't want to charge in here like a bull in a china shop. But what the question I was going to ask was, when you were saying earlier on about going through the, let's call it the obstacle course, right? These hunting parties. It seems to me, when you're saying you're required to use your magical powers, right? So would they therefore be testing the people's magical powers? This would be a way then that they would get to, whoever's being hunted, right? Let's say, now, how good is your magic? So as I know we spoke about the water bases, the military bases, the water bases, right, with you. And as you say, going through these different obstacle courses and things, or these obstacle type courses, and then forcing the kids or whoever it was to now use their magic, right, to see how good they are. And if you're going to get killed along the way, then, well, you weren't good enough for this this program, if you will, to begin with. But
or they're going to raise you from the, bring you back to life, because you're a high level asset,
That's it. So pretty much testing your skills and forcing you to use the skills that you have and really amping that up. Would you say that is part of it?
Yeah, I do believe that's part of it, that, they want you to, be able to think on your own. They want you to be quick to use and pull on the resources that you have available to you, whatever those are.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. Very interesting, because just talking about that, about these human hunts, I want to just go back there for a minute. I actually had a friend from school who in 1992 went over to America and went, he's a farmer. So he went over and he was working for a time on these stud farms, horse farms, these sort of things, somewhere in the south. And when he arrived there, he was pretty much offered to go hunting. So he kind of said, well, what do you hunt? And well, they used the N word, which I don't want to use on this program. But basically dark-skinned people, and went as far as being shown photographs of these hunts. So, I mean, it's definitely real. What do you make about that? Is this just what I mean, compared to what you're saying in these mountains, and this was in the south, the south of America, right?
Well, and when about was that?
1992. It was very clear.
So that shows, it shows that it's still happening. I experienced
very recent,
those
yeah,
in the 80s, the late 80s. So it's still even happening in 92, and I would say it still happens present day. We still see a lot of people go missing, whether off the military bases or through those national parks. There's been things going out where, it talks about all the numbers of missing people. Where do all those people go?
These were just dark-skinned people, African people. And I think he was offered that because of the fact that he came from South Africa. And of course, we are assumed to be this horrifically racist country, which I can tell you now for many years we haven't been. And I would imagine that would have been one of the reasons he was offered that. So why is that? Are we talking Ku Klux Klan here, or what is happening? Is that what it is, or is this something similar to what you're talking about, or is it something different? I mean,
I think it's similar in the Ku Klux Klan is just one of the divisions of the sovereign military. They're going to kind of be more of the regional, as you begin to break down those regions, you go from the elite who are ruling those departments to those who are actually, overseeing the assets. So those are going to be your Masons, your Mormons, your Jesuit Catholics, your Satanists, and your Kabbalah. So as you begin to look at those groups, each of them are going to have within their region certain territories that they oversee. They're going to have their own form of, how do they do things? How are they moving the assets? How are they managing those assets? And that's going to be both training, programming, as well as then you have the expendable as well. We've talked about how even that expendable goes into the whole vastness of the meat markets, where we've got these human markets. So is there a connection between, some of those hunts and some of the human markets? Are they profiting in some way through those hunts? You've got elite who are buying in to do those hunts, but they also either get a trophy or get meat from that. So, that's just the reality of it, is that, we've got this whole other world that most of us never even stop to think about.
Is it true that they have found some tunnels even there in Yellowstone Park?
Oh yeah, they're going to find more than tunnels there.
Yeah,
I think we're going to see big things, one of the things that went up, in the news was, I put up on my Twitter page was, somebody questioning about the super volcano and saying, if that super volcano goes off in Yellowstone, how far is its reach going to be? And they were, saying, could it even go as far as Minnesota? Well, I had to laugh at that because what's in Minnesota, you've got the affidavit sealed in the District of Minnesota court there. So, kind of these subtle threats that they put out that, what is there? You've got a Poseidon biochemical weapon, Would they release that? Would they allow, vast amounts of damage to happen? Is that maybe why they're all of a sudden, buying, selling things off of there? They're moving the elite out. They're moving all their assets out. And then, you know, th- I don't know if they would give
Well,
up that facility or not, but we'll find out.
what is your opinion on all this moving around? I mean, all this moving around. Do you think they're getting uncomfortable with their current operations? Do you think it's kind of like the cockroaches starting to scurry around, that they have to kind of be moving, or are they just rearranging things for a better way in which they
I
can
think,
operate?
yeah, I think as the good military have gone through the tunnel systems, we've seen a lot of the earthquakes. There's been speculations that a lot of the tunnels have been blown up. A lot of the older places have been, destroyed so that there isn't a going back to those places. So as more and more of their underground facilities are found, that means that there's less places for them to go. They're left to pretty much be operating up on the surface level in front of people's faces. There isn't any more places for them to go. So
Well, I can only hope that this is what's happening, because at the end of the day, I mean, we do know we are talking kind of end times here, right? And I think all of these things need to be exposed in a way that they're going to be exposed. You were just saying hunting the homeless as well. Makes sense that they would do stuff like that, because, these are people that are really unaccounted for, right? So it's not really for rituals, though, right? Someone was actually asking earlier in the chat as well.
no,
Is this
the
for
the hunt parties are separate. They're, usually they're not connected necessarily to rituals. You do have certain hunting parties that are associated with rituals. I've talked about kind of in the spring, in the fall, you're going to have those hunting parties. The Rothschilds were ones that would put those on their properties, in other countries. So you do have some that are connected to rituals, but others are not.
Yeah, Caleb is talking about Salt Lake City, which is deep Mormon territory, right? And
Yeah,
isn't
that's
that
a
interesting?
big
Because
area.
and that's interesting, because we're looking at the Mormons as part of one of the 5 pillars of the Illuminati, right? And I mean,
Right.
I don't know if you guys have watched my interview with Asia Rain. I've done 2 interviews with Asia Rain in the past, and I want to really highly recommend, if you haven't watched those interviews yet with her, that you do so, because she was highly trafficked by the Mormon church. And I think there are 12 guys, if memory serves me, at the top of that church, and she was abused by 10 of them. So her story is quite horrific in terms of that. And she really was probably one of the people I've heard the most doing these exposés on the Mormon church, right? And I mean, I think in terms of that, because that would be Mormon territory. And part of the Mormon belief is that if you have a different skin color, you are considered someone that is lesser than. Let's just put it that way. I mean, what is your take on that?
I can't speak for the Mormons, but I think that, when we tend to look at them, you tend to have more of that, Caucasian skin color. Um, you get a lot of interbreeding with those groups, and I think that we can show, through all the different things, that you get a lot of the exploitation, both of boys and girls, through the Mormon system. Um, so
It's
I think that's
I think
interesting, but
what was pointed out in that interview was that the Mormons have a belief, that is one of their beliefs, that if you're not of the palest skin color, you are lesser than. That is part of their belief system.
What if
So
that comes from the seed of Cain theology that, I think some of those churches, they teach that, that Cain was cursed, and that came through, um, some of them will teach that you had interaction between Eve and Lucifer, that she conceived, Cain um, from Lucifer, and that tainted his DNA, his bloodline. Others say that that curse was one, that when God cursed him, that turned him a different skin color. So some will teach that as well. So I think that, I have heard of that curse of Cain, where, they're saying that the darker skin colors are cursed. I don't believe that, but I think that that's what they teach in some of those religions.
yeah, and that's from what I'm hearing. What I'm not saying the Mormons are the only ones, but definitely from people within that structure are telling that story, that is part of their belief system. I mean, I find it
Yeah.
absolutely appalling that people in this day and age can actually even begin to believe that. And I really just hope to God it's time that people wake up from this nonsense, because it's because of that kind of brainwashing that this stuff continues. And, seriously, when just thinking about these stories, the only people that can change that is us, right? We
Right.
are the only ones that can actually stand up and say no. And, no longer just read what is being given to us, but actually act on what is morally right as well. Because if we're going to continue to just ignore these things, I mean, it's what happened in this country for so many years. We were brainwashed to believe that African people are lesser than. That's what we were brainwashed to believe, that an African person was less than you. I mean, what kind of
I think
nonsense
you're
is
right.
that?
I think that, like, there was a push, as especially even before the 80s and 90s, there was always kind of that push. And I think even in, today, like, some of that comes through specialized opportunities for, equality, where, why did they separate? Why did they give a lot of times special opportunities? And I'm not saying that people don't deserve that or that we shouldn't have that, but in that, I think that there's kind of a slight mockery that, they don't give individuals the full extent of who they can be um, in that. Um, some of those programs or specialized things are things where you have certain brotherhood individuals who are sponsoring. And in that, they're still holding captive people. They're still controlling, monitoring what that individual can do. They're capitalizing on that individual's brilliance, or, their abilities, their God-given gifts, and controlling that, you know. So I still see a lot of that control and monitoring through the
Right.
equality or the diversity projects that have been created.
Yeah, just Colleen is saying, yeah, as well. Shanti, the whole world has been brainwashed to believe that. Absolutely, I do believe that, and on some level or the other, and that simply just has to change, because there's so much division around that it's absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, we've got to wake up to the truth of this, because this is what's happening around us, right under our feet, so to speak. And our ignorance allows that. And it's up to us to change these things. That's really, makes me so mad, honestly, to sit and listen to this and to know that it's in our power to actually be the change, right? We are the ones that can actually be the change just by awakening and no longer choosing to be cognitively dissonant and pretending it's not happening, because it so is. Anyway. I'm not sure if there's anything else on that topic, Jess, that you want to cover in terms of the.
Not that I can think of right at this moment, but I think
Yeah.
we're going to have we'll have a further discussion on the hunts and make that a whole separate show. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But what was interesting as well, and I know I think probably about 2 years ago now, and I know that was one of the interviews that we did that I know I picked up a lot of problems from, was when we were speaking about Samson Balanov and her connection to Vlad, right? The bloodlines of Vlad in terms of that. But you know me, I'm not gonna stop with anything like that. But we actually, Bryce did a deep dive with us on Monday. And I want to tell you, Bryce is my favorite nerd. She really, really is. If anyone can research, that girl does. And she does a brilliant
Yeah, she does
job.
great research and very thorough.
Wow. Yeah. And we were doing the bloodlines of Vlad, Dracula, stuff like that. And it just brought to my attention as well, that we've done this before. So I'd like to just talk about that again as well, in terms of Vlad, Dracula, and the Order of the Dragon, because what she was saying is that they're all linked to some of his brothers. I don't have the exact information with me now, but all part of the Order of the Dragon. Now we're going back, obviously, many moons ago. And what I was questioning in terms of that, and I know we had a little off-air chat about this, but for me, it was like, he's sitting there, and obviously horrible things happened to him as a kid as well, but sitting there eating meals and enjoying probably human steaks, right? No doubt. But people right there, 5 or 10 meters away, are being impaled. Now, anyone who's impaled knows that you don't die instantly. I guess if it goes through your heart or something, maybe then. But there's a lot of groaning and moaning going on, and torturous deaths and stuff. And they're the man sitting, eating a meal. Now, in my opinion, that a human being, unless you've been corrupted badly, right? That is not human behavior unless you've been corrupted badly. So it brought me to the question about these rituals and things. We often speak about the 12-year-old rituals, especially for boys, that happen in the system. I don't know, maybe you can take us, just for those who don't know, just give us a quick run through about how those rituals take place with the 12-year-old boys. Because for me, I was questioning whether even back then, in those years, were they doing these satanic rituals with the 12-year-old, let's say the 12-year-old rituals, because I know it's at that stage when the kids become consciously, right? They now become consciously part of the system because they're willingly partaking. They're old enough to now know what they're doing. Before that, they're still considered somewhat innocent, even though they are corrupted and terrible things get done. And I mean, you just looking a lot of this SRA stuff, and you're hearing small kids talk about their own parents holding their hands over a knife and making them kill a baby, for example. So already these little kids are doing it, but they got someone doing it for them and with them. But at the age of 12, you now become the person who's responsible for doing that. So maybe you can just talk us through that. I'd be very interesting to know how far this actually goes back, right? Yeah.
I think it does go back, generations, and, possible it could go all the way back to the Canaanite times. It's hard to know exactly how far back each of these different rituals go. And, especially across cultures or countries, how far, does it extend? But I think that we would find that it does go all the way back, in that, these forms of wickedness were, why God brought judgment on the earth. And, that question of as to when does a child, choose, or is that that demonic component? Does that only kick in at age 12? There's several select ages when they go through the rituals for kids that are chosen in the system. For many, that first demonic connection or attachment is going to happen in the womb, or shortly after they're born. For the let's just say the hierarchy children is what we're talking about. Next, I've talked about those that were chosen for different things connected to the sovereign military or the protector programs, like the wolves or the vampires. They're presented before that family familiar spirit at age 5. And that's when they begin to have connections with that demonic spirit, that then is going to morph, change, and begin to transform them. That connection is not finalized until they're 21. They take that finalization of that connection, during a blue moon ritual. So usually it's around December sometime, or the fall. And, they'll take that final connection at age 21. So we do have other times or other seasons where, kids at different ages are going to have those connections made.
Can I just ask you, yeah, sorry, when you say the connection is made at the age of 5, for example, with whatever those spirits are, those lichens, right? When do they start acting on that? I mean, are they first just connected? Are they just, because now we're talking, especially when we're talking the werewolf, right? They actually shapeshift into that werewolf. So how long does it take? Let's say the child is 5 years old and it's now connected to whatever spirit is now going to be working through it. When does that child actually start shape-shifting and start doing the things that a werewolf does, for example, and doing the things that
I think that's really independent. I think that, that's between the child and that spirit as to when those things start to happen.
And so does that child then become responsible for his actions? Are we talking females as well? Are there girls and boys that okay, so it's not just
you can have girls and boys, but you have a whole nother element to this as well, because in the breeder programs, the Lebensborn programs, where they're breeding these hierarchy children, they're looking for certain gifts, they're looking for certain genetics. So this would include programs like the Genesis 6 project, out of Israel. In that, they're breeding for certain things. And as a child is born, they have individuals who are deciding before that child can, you've got a baby that's just born, and you literally have, a woman who will be designated to look into the eyes of that child and decide if that child has a soul or not. They literally will choose some children to live or some to die, or they will mark that child as being one that doesn't have a soul. And, they decide for that child and then will treat that child accordingly. So, some children will grow up thinking, like in some of the projects or programs where they were, I talked about how I saw, they would do surgery in the womb on a child. They would add pig parts so that when that child was born, it looked demonic. And then they would tell that mother that, that it was a demonic child, that it didn't have a soul. So you get into some of that whole part where, what is the truth is that those children do have souls. Every individual that's born is naturally inclined to the sin nature. So you constantly have that duality of, where we're drawn to sin, but at the same time, we're naturally drawn to good as well. And you're in that place of choosing. So I think that choice is available to all. Do they cater if they, I think that part of it is they choose certain children for certain parts or roles in the system or certain positions, they're going to cater to, that goodness or that evil based on, what position they need that child to fulfill. And, they're striving to keep equilibrium. So, how much of it is really the child versus how much is the adults? I've witnessed both, where I've seen some children that, it's like, as hard as it is to say, it's like that child is just evil. There are people in the system that from a young age are naturally inclined to that horrific evil, and they like to delight in it. And I think that's where we get back to Vlad the Impaler, is that, I wouldn't say it's a high percentage. I would put it at, about 5%. 5% of those in the system, I can say, sure, truly enjoyed evil and they delighted in it. And scripture tells us
But
that that's one of the things that will bring about the wrath of God, is that those who applaud evil and wickedness.
But would that not be, I mean, going back to what you were saying, when a child is literally, let's say, in the womb and already being tampered with? I mean, I've spoken
Right.
to some survivors who, the moment the mom was pregnant, she would go through torture to the
Right.
extent that, for example, they would really inflict all sorts of pain on her, put electrical clamps on her fingers, her nipples, her private parts, right? And shock her, because so
Right.
all that child knows is pain. And as you're saying, they're already putting pig parts on a baby when it's still in the womb, before it's even born. So by the time it comes out, now as a newborn, some woman is destined to look, or some woman now looks into the eyes of the child and deems that child to be soulless. Now, in my opinion, that's not the natural way of the child. That is a
Right.
demonic entity that has tampered with that child, or made it believe
Or how
that
much of
about
it is men, the people running those experiments,
right.
they've studied to know, at what point does a child bond with its mother. Children begin to bond with their mothers in the womb. But if, all that child knows is pain and torture in the womb, that right there severs some of that bonding. Then where's the next
Exactly.
point they bond with the mother? It's through nursing and through touch and being held after they're born. But if that mother rejects and, outcasts that child aside, well, right there now you have another, point where they're causing that torture and that pain, and that child knows no different. Some of
Right.
these children in the system have never known, good touch. They don't know what love is. They've never experienced that. They don't know what
Right.
it is to have a connection or to be able to trust somebody. Um, they've never known that.
That's exactly my point. So I would think that a child born in its full human capacity, a baby coming out of its mother's womb in its human form, created by God. So in other words, procreated from God in a natural way. Yes, we all have the ability to choose good or evil. That's what we do here. The greatest gift that God has given us here is free will and choice, right?
Right.
So we have that ability. But when we are, let's say, raised by parents who have the intention for us to be good, and they love us and they care for us, that's our natural ability that we are taught. But when you are taken and corrupted in the way that some of these kids are, let's say like Vlad the Impaler, and he's sitting there enjoying a human steak while people are dying and groaning in pain a few meters away from him, being impaled, that in my opinion is not a human that is in that body. It is some crazy, defective man, corrupted, or when I say man, right, we look like men, but definitely not a human being, in my opinion. I think that is the question I have, is that I don't think that a human person in its humanity can do stuff like that. And as you say, maybe it's a bloodline of Cain. I don't know, but it's a point of discussion for me, and I'd like to get to the bottom of that.
I think that they can. Scripture talks about in Genesis 6 that, why did the Lord send the flood? Why did he, punish the earth for the wickedness? It says that every thought and intent of man's heart was continuously evil and wicked. You've got that even in the, in Timothy, it talks about, and in the book of Thessalonians, it says in those last days, men will be lovers of pleasure, self, and money, rather than lovers of God. And so, at what point does that start? Or where is the cutoff? How many times does God give somebody an opportunity to turn away from that sin? I've seen,
Right.
some of these people engaging in evil for over, 40 years. And, I've also seen the Lord pursuing those people for those 40 years, where every time they want to engage in that evil, God always gives them that chance to turn away. And, when we look at it that way, each person, whether a child, whether an adult, every time we're presented with that opportunity to engage in evil, the Lord always gives us a way of escape, a way to turn around from that. And, the choice is that individuals. And, it gets down to, that. But does the system mess with that? Absolutely. There's times where really, no option is a good option. Every option that's presented to you is just, evil upon evil. We've talked about parents that, or people, adults that will, make the kids do the rituals, or will make them do horrific things. That certainly is not the child's choice. And sometimes those kids fight in spite of the consequences. How many times do they have to see other children die, or graphic, horrific things happen when they choose to do what's right? I think
Right.
those numbers are pretty high for a lot of the kids in the system, where they try to do what's good, but there's times where there's not options. Some even are willing to lay down their own lives. They're willing to die, but then the system, won't kill them, won't go through on that threat. Somebody else dies in their place, and they're stuck in, a place where they're basically in living hell.
And I think that goes right back to the beginning of time with the fallen angels, right?
Yeah.
When they came and mated with mankind and then really corrupted the human mind. And have always, like, if we just look at this, Lucifer has domain over the earth right now. We just got to look at our governments. We've got to look at our judicial system. We've got to look at our entertainment industry. It's all over there. And the way that this has corrupted the human mind and humanity in many, many ways.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like they know exactly how to dumb us down. They know exactly how to corrupt our kids. They know exactly what to put in our foods, what medicines, etc., to give us in order for us to be disconnected, really, call it disconnected from that which is good. And I mean, all we got to look at in the recent 3 years, when how many people opted for this because they were scared. Good people. I mean, I think that to me was such a telltale, to see how many people did not put their faith in God and Christ and their own heart and what they knew innately to be good. They were fearful that they were going to lose jobs. They were fearful that they were going to die. I mean, we all got to die at some point. That's one thing I think we all know, right? But it was such a fight against that. So for me, it was just that is such a telltale sign of how human beings have been taken away from that which they innately believe in, right?
Yeah. And I think it's important not to, to some extent, the enemy up until this point has had that dominion and that authority, but to never
Right.
forget that we have it. Who does it really rightfully belong to? It's us. So,
Right.
how are we going to steward that? Are we going to continue to allow the evil, the wickedness, or are we going to do something about that? Which means that we need to rise up. We need to not be afraid. We need to take that authority and walk in that.
Exactly. And I think that, that's where the duality sits, because when we're looking at, let's just say, kids who haven't been in the system and who've sort of grown up normal. I mean, you grow up and it's okay to kill an innocent dove, or it's okay, there's so many people that just have the kill culture. If you're scared of it, kill it. If it's come into your house, kill it. Instead of understanding that everything actually that is living on this earth is choosing life, and it is part of God's creation. So do we really have the right to kill a spider because it's sitting on our wall and we're scared of it, right? And I mean, I'm going back to those basic things, but yet you'll call yourself a religious person. And I'm not just talking Christianity, whatever, it could be any religion, right? You'll call yourself a religious person, but yet on the other hand, I look in South Africa, how many kids are brought up to kill animals? Hunting is the order of the day. Killing things is the order of the day. But without understanding that everything is created in the image of God, whether it's an animal, a bird, whatever it might be, right? And I think that's where, in my opinion, where I see such a duality. And I think unless we start understanding that as human beings, they will continue to kill and eat our kids, just like we continue to kill and eat their kids, right? I mean, for me, it's a mirror universe. And as long as we're not seeing that, we're gonna continue to be divided. My opinion.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way before. That's kind of interesting, but I agree with you that, it talks about in scripture that all creation, is part of that universal song that God created. Everything has a voice, everything is meant to, give him glory and praise, and to, reflect or to give us, wisdom and knowledge about the truths of God. That was things that God revealed to King Solomon, where we look at how many biblical truths can you get out of things that come in nature. I think of things like, the whales, the waterfalls, all of those things are things that speak to that first octave sound, and yet, where do we find that you get foundational healing? It's through those base sounds. You have
Exactly.
things that are foundational truths. So, things like that, everything is meant to point us back to those deeper
Right.
things that, our relationship with God is not meant to be surface level. There's
Exactly.
layers. How
Exactly.
deep do the whales swim? How deep do
Exactly.
those waterfalls go? That's meant to
Exactly.
replicate our relationship with God. It's
Look how many, for example, people will go swimming with the dolphins, and how these dolphins heal people. I mean, it takes me back to an interview I did with Adi Shab, who's a South African woman, and her baby, he's recently passed on now at the age of 30 something, but she unfortunately had vaccinations, terrible injury from vaccinations. And part of the journey that she took him on was, and I think, was it Florida, if I remember correctly? She, in fact, went to America somewhere and spent about 6 months with him there, being healed with the dolphins. After that, I mean, the dolphins, she'll tell, and I just get goosebumps even remembering that, how this particular dolphin is working with this child. And after that, he could actually start speaking. I mean, and this is, it's not one story like that. We hear this all the time, but then we also hear about how they've corrupted these dolphins, right? There's another one you hear about, I was just saying, I think in one of the other shows this week, where I think in the 60s, the CIA was giving the dolphins some type of drug, and this woman was teaching the dolphin that was on drugs to speak. And this dolphin, I mean, I don't know how real that is. I'm thinking it's real because it's been quite well documented. Was speaking, saying 1, 2, 3, and literally having sex with her. She claimed she was not having sex with the dolphin, but the dolphin wanted to have sex with her and was having sex with her, according to what this is being said, what they said. And they did it. They did the study for a long time, and then they took the dolphin away from this woman, and this dolphin was already completely in love with her. And then, from what I'm hearing, the dolphin killed itself, basically suicided itself. So exactly when the evil of humanity or man, and I don't want to say humanity because I don't think it's humanity. I really and truly don't. I think we are all in human bodies. We all look the same. We've got 2 arms, 2 legs, whatever. But there's a different type of spirit that inhabits this body when it's not human. And it's those kinds of people that have the ability, yes, to corrupt the more innocent type human beings and turn them into something that is more disgusting and depraved. And they then match these demonic spirits to them, right? And then they get
all
to do
all sorts of sins, you know, and
exactly.
deprivation.
Exactly. I mean, you would say exactly when, you know, the whales, how many people have had the most incredible healing experience from whales? And let us never forget the sharks. You know, sharks have got such a bad rap. And I'm telling you that
I'll let them have the bad rap, Shanti.
No, I'm not going to.
I've never known a shark to be nice, you know, that has teeth.
But I think the movie Jaws did a lot to bring a bad rap to sharks. Sharks are actually incredible. They're actually incredible in terms of their energies and stuff like that as well. But I know I'm up against the steel wall when I talk about stuff like that. But again, I'm a communicator, so I know that they're not what human beings or what we've been led or taught. Because again, you don't like it, you just kill it, or you're scared of it, just kill it. It's okay to kill it, you know, if we don't understand it. And I think that's where us as humans need to wake the F up. Really, we need to wake the F up. And it's like hunting other humans because they are lesser beings than us, according to who? I've never seen another human as being a lesser being than me. But if you are going to be corrupted in that way, and if your mind is going to be taught, and it's constantly etched in you, that is what it is, that's how we divide, and that's how we conquer each other, not through love, but through fear. And that fear is pain, torture, all sorts of terrible things that we are taught, in my opinion, again.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in that. And, you know, how are we taught to view those things? And that starts at a very young age. You know, little ones are very curious and, you know, they watch reactions. A lot of times children don't have a natural negative reaction to things. They have more of a curiosity. They want to see how it works. They want to figure it out. You know, they want to test it out, whether it's good or bad. And a lot of times, you know, our fears, our insecurities will form how that child reacts to things. But at the core, God made us to be curious, made us to explore, to discover, to see, you know, what things are, how they work. So we do take a lot of that away from our children, I think, by allowing fear to overrule our lives and not allowing them to have that natural discovery.
I saw a very cute little video thing on this child, and I think it was probably maybe Mexico, somewhere around there, with these huge, big tarantula spiders. This child was taught that, I mean, obviously her parents were friends of the spiders, but you want to see how these spiders loved her, and you want to see how she loved these spiders. they would play with her, and you could see the love. You could see that energy as they were interacting. So she had no fear of them. You see, the minute we fear them, we're going to kill them, right? And then, of course, they will pick up on your energy as well. I mean, just look at dogs, right? If you're an angry person and you're going to raise an angry dog, for example, that's all energy related. So a child doesn't naturally want to hurt something. When a child is small and in its innocence, it doesn't naturally want to go and wring a bird's neck. It doesn't naturally want to go and harm something. It is naturally loving. I mean, look at kids with puppies and kittens, like that sort of thing. They just want to hug them. I mean, I'll hurt them because I want to hug them so much, right? But it's not something they will naturally do to want to debilitate or harm them. We taught that. So I just find that very interesting.
Right.
It's all about love. You know, when we start behaving in a more loving way and a more accepting way towards each other, and not just us, but other species as well. I think that's when the world becomes a much better place.
Absolutely.
Anyway. Cool. Well, I don't really have anything else here on my page for you today. I don't know, Jess, is there anything else still from your side that you might have?
No, I think we've covered a lot today. Great discussion.
Indeed.
Very cool.
Well, on that note, would you like to end off for us in prayer, Madame?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for this time. We thank you for all the beautiful things that you have given to us in creation. We thank you that you allow us to explore, to discover, to appreciate. And we ask, Lord, that you would just take away every fear that we have. Let us not be those who live in fear, but let us be those who walk boldly, who teach boldly the truths about your kingdom and about your power, your might, your glory. Your word says that all of creation sings your praises. And I take that to mean that as we stop to listen to each part of creation, that we're going to hear what that creation has to say about you. Help us to be those that are quick to listen, and let us be those who are quick to make a difference when we see things being wronged, when we see things that should not be, when we see wickedness abounding. Let us be quick to step in front of that and bring an end to that wickedness. We ask this in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you, Captain of my soul. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. Wow. Okay. That's amazing. So, Jessie, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone in our chat today. We will see you back next week again, as well as Tuesday evening with Alice Parola. So Jessie's going to be on with Alice Parola again on Tuesday, back again on Wednesday, and we will still just confirm with a potential Wednesday guest for next week, but we'll keep you updated. Jess has been away. For those of you who joined the book club, Jess has been away, so we're going to resume again for the Patreons in January with Corrie ten Boom's book. Yeah. Okay, everybody. God bless you all. Take good care of yourselves, and we shall see you very, very, very soon. We'll see you tomorrow with Caleb Jade again. Look forward to that one. Bye, guys. See you soon.